Winds are fairly light, but it's certainly very hot really across much of the west. The rain on Sunday is working its way across the Midwest. It's really dry ahead of there, across into the south as well. That will continue to work its way eastwards through Monday, pushing eventually into the northeast, and some very heavy rain working its way through eastern Canada.
Hi, I'm Steve Clements, and I have a question.
These days, it's hard to filter out the noise and keep track of what's really important. The Bottom Line tackles the big issues that are shaping the United States, its people, its economy, and the way it deals with the rest of the world. The Bottom Line, only on Al Jazeera.
A diverse range of stories from across the globe, from the perspective of our network's journalists. On Al Jazeera.
This is Al Jazeera. A reminder of our headlines this hour. The United States is preparing for a weekend of protests as pro- and anti-Trump demonstrators gather to highlight racial injustice and support for the police. The pro-Trump rally has already taken place outside the Kentucky Derby horse race in Louisville. El Salvador's president denies reports he offered the powerful gang MS-13 better prison conditions in exchange for election support and lowering the murder rates. The government invited journalists to a prison on Friday to show them the tough, overcrowded conditions. And the Sudanese government has declared a 3-month state of emergency after weeks of flooding. Nearly 100 people have died. The Nile has risen to levels not seen in a century. And overall rates of flooding and rain have exceeded records set in the 1940s. Chilean rescue workers have abandoned their search for survivors under the rubble of a collapsed building in Beirut. Signs of life were detected there on Thursday, a month after the catastrophic port explosion that killed at least 191 people. The rescuers were able to go down a tunnel inside the building to confirm there were no survivors.
Unfortunately, today we can say that technically there is no sign of life inside the building.
Thousands of women and university students are back on the streets of the Belarusian capital, Minsk, calling on President Alexander Lukashenko to resign. Masked security agents have dragged protesters off the streets and bundled them into vans. At least 30 students have been detained. The country has been gripped by protests since last month's disputed presidential election. Lukashenko denies opposition accusations that he rigged the polls to stay in office.
We've got the words, "We are tired of the police state" here. They come to the universities, they grab people at their doorsteps. They're already starting to come to schools. What's next? Kindergartens?
The law hasn't been observed in our country in a long time. First, the elections were rigged. Then the people who came out to protect their rights were beaten, murdered, arrested.
Well, Belarusian opposition activist Olga Kowalkova says she was forced to leave the country and has now arrived in Poland. Kowalkova says she was taken to a border crossing where she travelled on to Warsaw. The activist is a senior figure in the Belarusian Opposition Coordination Council. She was sentenced to 10 days in prison back in August. Several regions in Mexico have run out of death certificates because of the high number of people killed during the coronavirus pandemic. Baja California, the state of Mexico, and Mexico City are among areas that have run out. Authorities say 1 million new forms are being printed and distributed. Mexico has the 4th highest death toll in the world, with more than 66,000 people killed in the outbreak. Millions of students across the world are returning to school this week after months of the coronavirus pandemic closures. But nations differ significantly in their approaches. Rahila Mohammed reports on the impact distance learning is having in Mexico.
This is not just a tortilla shop in the heart of Mexico City. Named the Corner of Hope, it intends to offer just that, hope, by offering disadvantaged children a chance to carry on learning remotely during the pandemic. Before classes begin, students arrive wearing masks and wash their hands. Volunteers here teach English, mathematics and science. They also provide textbooks, a smartphone and laptop. The shop owner says she wanted to help by offering free tutoring and a study space for those in need.
At this tortilla shop, we know everything about the neighbourhood. We started asking, how are you going to deal with this return to school? And some said, I don't have this or that. So we, the neighbours, started organising support.
Mexico's government has set up virtual classes through radio and television to ensure students maintain their education. But taking classes online isn't so easy for everyone. More than half of households here don't own a computer, while only 56% have access to the internet. Families here are worried about how their children will keep up with classes.
I don't have internet or devices. It's very difficult for me to send homework. The teacher at this tortilla shop is helping me. She lends me the devices to send the homework.
For high school student Ida Moreno, studying at the tortilla shop and using its Wi-Fi is making a difference.
Yes, this works for me because before I couldn't learn much. Now I can have support from the TV.
But analysts believe more needs to be done to make sure that all kids get the same quality of education.
There is a community that is participating in supporting these children who don't have access to those resources, and that is very important. We see it. At the same time, the government is not providing the resources we need, and that is very important too.
Students in Mexico won't return to school until authorities say it's safe to do so, which means around 30 million may be forced to learn remotely. And for now, community-driven initiatives like this will fill some of the education gap. Rahila Mohammed, Al Jazeera.
Millions of students have also gone back to school in Iran. They've been closed since early March, and as Asad Beg reports from Tehran, many parents think it's still too early to return.
Temperature checks, a disinfectant tunnel and social distancing is what met students returning to school in Tehran. Journalists were invited to this school to see Iran's safety measures. President Hassan Rouhani addressed the flag-waving children via video link.
Today, the education starts. It means education doesn't shut down even under the toughest conditions. It is the teacher's responsibility to remove anxiety from the minds of students and their families. Anxiety will prevent students from beginning the educational year.
Some in the country have questioned the government's handling of the pandemic.
Tehran is still considered under Iran's red zone for coronavirus infections. And despite measures put in place in schools like this one, some parents are still reluctant to send their children back into school.
I have lots of stress and I'm worried. One of my sons has allergies, and I disagree with him attending school in this situation. I think I won't let him go to school because his health is a priority over education. They are kids, they touch everything, and then they touch their faces.
The children, however, seemed less concerned.
I think it's good to come to school. We've stayed at home for nearly half the year and studied online. Yes, there are concerns about the virus at school, but we should just observe the health protocols.
Class times have been reduced to 35 minutes. Students attend on alternate days, and an online learning application has been introduced. The Education Minister tried to reassure parents.
The health of students is our most important concern. We don't want to put students' health at risk. We trust the health ministry has had great experience fighting the virus. We hope families also trust us, and will be sure that the education sector is following health protocols.
More than 100 people a day are dying from the coronavirus in Iran, and about 2,000 are becoming infected. The government may want to return to normality, but it's still not clear it has a grip of the spread of the virus. Asad Beg, Al Jazeera, Tehran.
In Afghanistan, schools have reopened after a 5-month suspension. And in a country working to improve literacy, there's much to do. But as Charlotte Bellis reports, the public